me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair. Don't tell me the lights are shining any place but there. We will dance a hoochie coochie, I will be your tootsie wootsie, if you will meet me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair.
Hello, I'm Michael Barone of Pipe Dreams. What would it be like to go back in time to 1904 and the World's Fair, giving us a chance to hear the world's most famous organists play on the St. Louis Exposition Organ? That's the same pipe organ that forms the nucleus of the huge Wanamaker organ in Philadelphia today. Frederick R. Weber shared boyhood memories with the Organ Historical Society in 1959, and these are the words of his reminiscence. Among the most famous organs of America was that of the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, held in St. Louis, Missouri in 1904. This magnificent organ of 5 manuals and 138 voices is quite unknown to the present generation, probably because of its rather brief life of but a few months. It stood in Festival Hall, and its glistening white facade was 70 feet wide, 30 feet deep, and 50 feet high. 80 of the world's most eminent organists presented daily recitals upon it during the summer of 1904. The exposition marked the high point of all World's Fairs, but it was the only time that an organ formed the architectural focal point of a vast composition of buildings. 2 square miles of space on what was then the western rim of St. Louis were required to accommodate the architectural grandeur, which has never been equaled. Visualize, if such a thing is possible, a series of great lagoons and sparkling cascades of water surrounded by scores of snow-white buildings in the florid Parisian boulevard-esque style of those days. Some of these buildings were more than a quarter of a mile long. At the end of the main access stood Festival Hall, a circular building done in the grand style, surmounted by a dome of utmost exuberance. It stood on a crescent-shaped hill, and before it a series of waterfalls descended into the lagoons. Stairways of monumental scale swept in graceful curves to Festival Hall, and these approaches were adorned with lavish balustrades and a profusion of groups of statuary. Our country's most famous architects had collaborated in making it the most stupendous architectural composition in the world, and to outdo the Columbian Exposition of the previous decade. It was stage carpentry done in the grand style, but of the 19 million visitors of that memorable summer, few paused to consider the fact that all of this magnificence was stage carpentry. Even to the sparkling cascades before the Festival Hall, all was wooden framework and lath and white stucco, even the great gobs of faultless architectural detail. On a platform within the lofty circular hall stood Dr. George Ashdown Oddsley's masterpiece. Dr. Oddsley, as every organ enthusiast knows, was a Scottish architect who'd lived for a time in London before coming to America. He was a perfectionist in regard to excellent materials and exquisite craftsmanship, and his knowledge of the organ, its tonal appointments, and its construction was so extensive that he would have rewritten the entire Encyclopedia Britannica and devoted every page of it to the organ. The large organ in Festival Hall was the realization of a lifelong dream and was built according to his design by the Los Angeles Art Organ Company. Dr. Oddsley had an able staff of associates. One of these was Murray M. Harris, an admirer of organ builder Hilborn Roosevelt, and a member of the firm of Fletcher and Harris, who had built the 5-manual 57-rank organ for Stanford University, also the First Methodist Church and B'nai B'rith, and other notable organs in Los Angeles and elsewhere. Another assistant was William B. Fleming, who had started as a Boston carpenter, but who had been trained in organ building by Charles S. and William B. Haskell. Thomas Ross, a skilled pipe maker, and Frederick Bolton, a voicer, are worthy of mention, and by all means John W. Whiteley, who had helped William Tyne design and voice his remarkable imitative string tones, and Edward L. Crome, an experienced organ man, deserves being included. It's difficult for people of the present generation to know the background of those days. Few of the 13 million people who paid 50 cents to enter the exposition grounds and 6 million more who had complimentary tickets had ever seen anything other than a church organ of 2 manuals and 12 or 16 stops. Very few concert organs existed in America at that time, and some of these were of tonal designs that differed little from that of a church organ, except that they contained more pipes. The world's most famous concert organ of that period, built by a celebrated English firm, followed the beaten path of commonplace tonal appointments and limited flexibility. The endless stream of visitors who entered Festival Hall knew little and cared less about Dr. Oddsley's revolutionary ideas. To them, the enormous organ was just another sight to be included in their rounds. They gaped at the 160 horseless carriages on exhibit. They smiled in derision at Mr. DeForest's wireless telegraph. They tramped as many of the 45 miles of 25-foot-wide balustraded pavements as their strength permitted, and then, sweltering in the Missouri heat, they sought rest in Festival Hall to hear Alexander Guillemot or Clarence Eddy or S. Archer Gibson or Clarence Dickinson put the organ through its paces. Dr. Oddsley's views were set forth in a series of articles published in 1887 and 88 in The English Mechanic and World of Science. He thought in terms of tonal families rather than in terms of individual voices. He described diapason families of various pitches and tonal textures, Gemshorn families, string families, flute families, chorus reeds, imitative reeds, and orchestral color galore. No rank was allowed to stand alone. A 32-foot diapason or a string called for a 16 or a 10 2/3 or 8 or 5 1/3, a 4, a 3 1/5, a 2 2/3, a 2-foot, and one or more mixtures. Dr. Oddsley's scheme called for neither foundational organs nor organs that were all top work. His idea of an organ was that of a carefully balanced instrument with a wealth of tonal resources from 64-foot pitch to the most acute mixture, and always with an abundance of bottom, middle, and top. And then, among other things, he demanded utmost flexibility and multiple expression. The festival organ had all of these things. The swell organ alone was capable of 17,179,869,183 distinct tonal combinations, an unlimited expressive opportunity. The great organ contained 26 stops, 12 of which were under expression. It included stops of the 32-foot harmonic series and separate families of stops in the 16 and 8-foot harmonic series as well. Couplers, pistons, and double-touch system allowing more stops to be heard when the keys were depressed extra hard provided additional resources. The swell organ had 34 stops, was enclosed in 2 swell boxes. In its first division were stops of the woodwind character, flutes, piccolo, clarinets, oboe, corno di bassetto, fagotto, and contrafagotto, as well as stops of the horn and viol family with several open flutes. The second division of the swell organ contained 11 imitative string voices at 8-foot pitches. With its compound expressive resources, it was estimated that a different combination could be drawn every minute, night and day, and it would require 32,000 years to exhaust all possible combinations. The choir organ contained 19 stops of refined accompanimental character, and, like the great and the swell divisions, it was tonally structured, with quiet voices at 4-foot pitches plus a 6-rank mixture, this division entirely under expression. The echo division contained 12 stops of delicate voicing and was also entirely expressive. The remarkable pedal organ included 26 complete ranks of pipes, 4 borrowed ranks, and a 6-rank mixture. The organ contained, in addition to its 138 speaking stops, 36 couplers and 46 pistons. There were 7 swell shoes. The main organ had 5 bellows, each 6 by 12 foot in size, and each with 3 feeders. The echo organ had 4-foot 3-inch by 12-foot bellows with 3 feeders. The main organ had 2 10-horsepower motors, and the echo organ a 1.5 horsepower motor. The wind chests contained 20,000 feet of wood, The bellows and the regulators 8,000 feet, and the wind trunks 2,000 feet. The framing was 3 inches by 12 inches of select California sugar pine, of which 7,000 feet were required, and the wood pipes contained 35,000 feet of the same material. The organ filled 12 of the largest sized furniture cars. To hear the organ, one boarded the Olive Street trolley in downtown St. Louis and rode 4 miles to Kings Highway. Just beyond Forest Park stood the Exposition with all of its 1,576 buildings. The largest were arranged along either side of a spacious lagoon, and at the far end and crowning the entire group stood the circular festival hall with its great white dome. A series of waterfalls before it sparkled in the summer sunlight and then tumbled into the artificial lake, which was rectangular and almost a mile long. Ascending one of the 2 curved stairways which skirted the Cascades, one reached the arched doorway of the music hall. Entering it, one saw a great circular auditorium, at one end of which was the organ. It contained 3 rectangular flats, each comprising 20 or so display pipes. The lower part of the case rose to a height of about 12 feet. Above this were 4 paneled pilasters, each of which was about 5 feet wide. Next came an ornate cornice, in the center of which rose a tall triangular cresting terminating in a lyre, supported by 2 figures, the muse of sacred music and the muse of concert music. And as one sits and admires this beautiful casework, unaware that the organ is not one of normal size, a door the size of a postage stamp opens under the left-hand flat, and a man the size of the first joint of one's finger appears. Here is a lesson in scale, not musical scale, not pipe scale, but architectural scale. Architectural scale is adjusted to the module of the human figure. If a man appears to be of normal height when standing before a building, then the building is of normal scale. But if he looks like one's finger, then the scale is monumental. Keeping this in mind, one realizes that the festival hall organ is not one of average size. Its largest display pipe is not 6, but nearly 18 inches in diameter and 36 feet in length. As a schoolboy, the writer haunted Festival Hall during the summer of 1904, charmed by the sweet music so soft that only the keenest ears could detect it, and awed by a flood of melody that sounded like a chorus of giants singing. The Festival Hall organ did not go to the Kansas City Convention Hall when the exposition closed, as was originally intended. It lay in storage for a time, and then was shipped to Philadelphia, where Mr. John Wanamaker rebuilt it, and together with Mr. Rodman Wanamaker, enlarged it to 6 manuals, 451 stops, and 28,750 pipes. It is hoped that this famous organ may be allowed to stand in its present location in the Grand Court of the Wanamaker Department Store in Philadelphia as a monument to Dr. G.A. Oddsley and the tonal qualities that he advocated. In a day when most organs contained unrelated stops, nearly all of 8-foot pitch, this organ taught its valuable lesson of voices at 6 or 7 pitches, plus mixtures. It taught the lesson of tonal texture and variety of color at a time when a dulciana, a solitional, and a viol all sounded alike. It impressed upon the men of those times the value of expression and multiple expression, to say nothing of the use of the finest materials and highly skilled craftsmanship. May its mighty pipes never be reduced to the dimensions of lemonade straws. Those were the reminiscences of Frederick R. Weber, who shared his boyhood memories with the Organ Historical Society back in 1959. Weber's captivation with this pipe organ, furthered by the willingness of organ builder William B. Fleming to answer his endless questions, led to a lifelong interest in the King of Instruments. Weber became a Lutheran minister and wrote books on architecture, art, and church liturgy, and he was a founder of the Organ Historical Society. Reportedly, his vast knowledge of organ historical information far overshadowed all others, and his papers are preserved at the OHS archive in Villanova, Pennsylvania. The Wanamaker organ, as the St. Louis Exposition organ eventually became, continues to play today and is a daily feature in the Grand Court of Macy's department store in Center City, Philadelphia. I hope you've enjoyed this musical time travel adventure to the St. Louis Fair of years ago. Do be sure to check out Pipe Dreams, which is broadcast on many public radio stations around the country, or is available 24/7 online at pipedreams.org. I hope you'll find it entertaining too. I'm Michael Barone. Thank you for listening.
In church sat a man near the door. Asleep he was starting to snore. The minister rose and he said, "We will close singing meet on the beautiful shore." The man in the back then awoke. He caught the last words that he spoke. He said, "Parson White, you can meet me all right, but the beautiful shore is a joke. Meet me in St. Louis, Louis, meet me at the fair. Don't tell me the lights are shining any place but there. I'll be waiting at the station for the whole darn congregation. So meet me in St. Louis.